Reverend Dr. Elliot Robinson with the R3 podcast, where we look at race, religion, and rhetoric through a lens of misinformation and disinformation. We are now in the cauldron. We are in the mixer of white supremacy ideology basically being mainstreamed and validated in the United States of America at, again, the highest levels of government, with some of the softest repudiations of white supremacist activity, white supremacist rhetoric, white supremacist language, probably since the 60s, perhaps even the 50s in this country. So let's begin where we kind of pick up where we left off last episode, where we're looking at, will white America settle for racism? So let's look at our definition of white supremacy again. The purpose of white supremacy groups, organizations, institutions is this: manipulate the financial and political exploitation white people experience from white lawmakers, corporations, and the wealthy elite by redirecting white anger and betrayal away from white exploiters and turning it into rage against minority groups. Let me give you that again. The purpose of white supremacy groups, institutions, and organizations is this: manipulate the financial and political exploitation white people experience from white lawmakers, corporations, and the wealthy elite by redirecting white anger and betrayal away from the white exploiters and turning it into rage against minority groups. That's what we are seeing right now, and it is in full tilt across various industry, across various medium, across various aspects, even within our government. They are moving this Project 2025 machine right along now that they have gutted pretty much every civil servant function. They have vastly unfunded pretty much almost every agency, with the exception of the Department of Defense and or ICE, depending on how you look at where that money is moved, Homeland Security. And they have begun the process of basically self-dealing and double dealing across the spectrum towards companies and corporations and entities that have supported the current administration. People are now beginning to feel the pain of these decisions, of basically this massive exploitation, this massive redistribution of wealth, this massive really misuse of government funds that are collected through our federal income tax for the purpose of being redirected towards services that help the American public. That's not what they're being used for, and people are beginning to feel that all over the country, and rightfully so. Many are feeling duped as well. They should, because they have been duped. Now, the new hot conversation right now story was broken by Politico, the publication, in which they got the group chat of the Young Republicans. The Young Republicans, they're nationally affiliated with the GOP. They are the rising, the up and coming within the GOP, within the Republican Party. And Politico was showing all of the racist and inflammatory and derogatory language that was coming out in this particular series of chats. But my question is, who would be surprised? Like, am I surprised that young Republicans would be making incredibly derogatory comments about African Americans, about women, about Jews, making fun of the Holocaust, saying that Hitler was a great guy? Why would that surprise anyone? I'm not really sure why that is a surprise. I think maybe perhaps to see it for oneself is shocking. But let's be for real. The undercurrent of this party has always been in that direction. The GOP has not been about the policy things that made them the GOP. We could always say that has always been sort of underneath the surface in some regard in terms of policy direction. But no one should be surprised, given probably the tenor and the tilt of the party over the last, obviously, let's say 10 years. So no, I'm not surprised by it. To see it so openly talked about amongst young leaders in a political party, one would think there would be deference and discretion. But when you think about something, and I want us to think about this thing, the people who are in that chat, the adults who are in that chat, know no other way. This is not an excuse. This is just a reality check. And follow me as I kind of walk us through this timeline. There was a time when an individual who was maybe over 35 and older knew what government was supposed to look like, knew how the federal government was supposed to function, knew that there was give and take, that people on both sides of the aisle maybe would have some external bickering, but behind closed doors, they would come together and they would try to find ways to govern the country for the most part, the greater good of the people, obviously also looking at the interest of individuals who have funded or supported their campaigns. But there was always this expectation that there would be give and take, that they would go behind closed doors, they would hammer things out, and they would try to come up with the best deal possible, given the various and sundry interests that were at play. Now, that changed exponentially with the presidency of Barack Obama. Why do I say that? Leading up to the presidency, in 2007, the Tea Party was founded. The Tea Party was at the time a branch of, obviously, the GOP. I think it was Rand Paul founded it, was sort of the founder, the sponsor behind the Tea Party. Their idea was to be low tax. They wanted less government interference. They wanted the idea of more state rights. They didn't want the federal government interfering in what they did at the state level. That was the gist of the Tea Party. It goes back to the original Tea Party, where they were fighting taxation on tea. Hence, the tea was thrown into the harbor, Boston Harbor. Tea Party. That's the connection. Then President Obama was elected in 2008. In 2010, he lost Congress. And that's when things changed, probably forever. Well, what happened? Boehner comes out and he says this: we're going to do everything, and I mean everything we can do, to kill it, to stop it, to slow it down, whatever we can. And what he was talking about was President Obama's agenda. He was basically drawing a line in the sand, Boehner was, that there would be no cooperation with that current administration. McConnell went so far as to say our one and only goal is to make sure that Obama is a one-term president. So we entered the era of 100% party line obstructionism. And to break ranks, to do anything with the Democrats, would have been seen as being a traitor of the party. Now, this is in 2010. Fast forward 15 years, 2025, the individuals who were in this chat, for the most part, anyone who is 28 years of age and younger, for the most part, give or take, assuming most young people begin to pay attention even a little bit to politics when they're around 10 to 12 years old, for the most part. We could even say perhaps even older. So we can say 35 and younger have never known a competently, accurately, professionally functioning government. All they know is obstructionism, rhetoric, propaganda. That's their introduction to how government should run. No microeconomics, no macroeconomics, no having the ability to actually write legislation, no understanding of policy, no understanding of foreign affairs. And I'm making broad brush statements because those things aren't important in the world of politics that they grew up watching. What was important to them was winning or stopping the other side from doing something that they want to do because you want to do what you want to do. And if you can't stop them, then you find ways to come up with ways to obstruct them, whether they're true or whether they are false. It does not matter. The only thing that matters is the people that back you or support you get what they want. And so that is the world of politics that they were raised in. They're not being raised in a world of politics in which you are there to serve the people who elect you. Absolutely not. They know a world of politics where you are elected based on the people who back you financially, so that you then turn around and do what they want you to do. That's the world that they're raised in. Now, if in that world you have this ideology, this thought, this racist piece, then there's nothing wrong with that. That's a part of the process, because the people who are backing and supporting your party are in 100% agreement with it. In fact, they're sending out talking points. They're sending out important memoranda telling you we are now moving to a new phase. You're not going to reject any of this racism. You're going to embrace it, because it's already been embraced and has been being embraced by the individuals who have formed and shaped you. So no, I'm not surprised at all that the young Republicans would actually feel this way, and that their leadership would have this sort of tenor and tone, because basically you will know a fruit by its tree. You'll know a tree by its fruit. So this is the fruit of this tree. These young Republicans are the fruit of the Republican tree. And so it's interesting also when the individuals talked about, we have to memorialize and venerate Charlie Kirk. Isn't it amazing that as soon as he passed, there is this heightened elevation, some without much provocation from the external, although we now know that pretty much, they've come in and hijacked this entire network in order to kind of help expand the propaganda of white supremacy, and then add some white Christian nationalism and sort of mainstream some of their thoughts and ideologies. But the immediate aftermath was a heightened level of racial animus and a heightened level of racial aggression, because that was the platform that undergirded his on-campus debates. And so once he was gone, that came out almost immediately. Now it's kind of being hijacked by the larger GOP, because it's an avenue for them to be able to go and to basically proselytize basically young whites, because that's really their demographic. That's the demographic that they are targeting at this moment in order to kind of grow this aspect of their political party. They're looking at 20 years from now, and how can they keep this white supremacist ideology going forward? You have to get them while they're young. Why are there all these attacks on colleges who don't allow for conservative, as they say, don't allow for conservative points of view? Because they want to have these turning point chapters on every single campus where they are the heavy hand in the academic institutions. They are the whistleblowers who are calling out professors. They are the ones who are bringing a certain level of racism in the day-to-day lives on the campus. And so that's what we're seeing here. So it is to be expected that this group would have these points of view. What I find is a conflation of what this means in the macro in terms of nationwide, because they're saying, well, this is the death of the Democratic Party for the youth. Well, that's saying a lot, because you're looking at a very narrow targeted group of young adults who are wedded to the ideology, to the methodology, to the language, to the beliefs of the GOP party. They do not represent all youth. They do not represent all young adults. They do not represent all basically middle-aged adults. 35, you're a grown woman. You're a grown woman. You're a grown man with benefits in a 401k. So you're not a child anymore. So they don't represent all of the adults who are in that 35 and under age group who are white. So let's not conflate what this means across the whole country, because you have a very affinity group for the GOP party. We can say what is troubling about it is that now what it allows is it allows a validation of these thoughts and these methodologies to be able to go out. I think the important thing is that it's called out for what it is. I love that Politico brought it to light so that those individuals who are seeing it and it's sort of in their circle of influence, they have the opportunity to reject it as not being normal. because actual young adults, not 28, 29, 30-year-olds, but actual young adults who are getting this information on social media, who are seeing this online, who are feeling like, well, more people feel this way. Maybe I should feel this way as well. By Politico sort of shining a light on this, it provides an opportunity for them to reject it and to exit stage left. And so that's, I think, why it's important to call these things out and to not allow them to sit and to simmer, and to allow their tentacles, sort of like the Marvel comic Hydra, to be able to go and to move out and to spread out into different areas. But that is what we are facing in this moment. I will say this. There is definitely the effort to mainstream white supremacist ideology, iconography, and it's at a very high level. And again, like I said, even in the highest levels of government, we saw with Representative Congressman John Taylor, one of his staffers, individual Angelo Alia, had a American flag with the swastika embossed inside of the flag. It was sitting behind him in his cubicle while he was on a Zoom call. Now, let's be real. Of course, Taylor says, I believe it's an act of vandalization, and I believe that someone is doing this on purpose. The reality is, it was sitting behind him on a Zoom call. We all know if you're doing Zoom calls, what's behind you. It was prominently displayed over his shoulder, the staffer, which means that either he'd been doing it for so long, he didn't even see it anymore, or he was making a statement that this is what he believes, and that tangentially, because he is in the office of Representative Taylor, Representative Taylor is okay with this, because in Aaliyah's capacity as a staffer, that's what was in the background. So it's either one of two things. Either it was done very intentionally and very purposely for this express purpose, or it had been there so long, he didn't even see it anymore. And if that's the case, that means it had been in his cubicle so long, no one else in the office had seen it, and or no one else thought it was a problem to be sitting in his cubicle behind him. So either way, it's a lot of BS. Either it was so okay that when people saw it for the first time and the second time and the third time, no one thought to say, hey, whoa, what are you doing? You need to take that down. And or it was done on purpose for this purpose, which was to mainstream this idea of Nazi iconography, Nazi party, Aryan ideology, and it existing within the United States of America. What I found interesting was Vice President J.D. Vance doing the rounds on the Turning Point broadcast, as he again tries to ingratiate himself with the followers of the late Charlie Kirk. He did not firmly and vehemently repudiate it. Here's what's interesting to me. His wife is a woman of whole Indian descent. There is nothing that is accepting in white supremacy of interracial marriages it's not accepting. And that his children are biracial. And yet he is perfectly fine with the presence of white supremacy within his political party, even when it means his wife is completely eviscerated online. I mean, she's been called some horrible things. And yet he sits and he plays in those spaces. I've seen him on podcasts talking about the idea of country, the idea of heritage, and by his own definitions, his own children would not be able to partake in the heritage of forefathers because they are not fully of white American descent. It's literally insane. But that tells you how just unserious at the highest elite levels they are about white supremacy in terms of an official ideology of shared equal whiteness. There is no shared equal whiteness for those who propagate the idea of white supremacy. There is no white equality. If there was white equality, there would have never been a big, beautiful bill. Because the big, beautiful bill has decimated Americans across the board, across racial and ethnic lines. They would never have allowed that to happen. They would never have allowed whites to suffer the way that they're suffering because of tariffs if they really believed in white supremacy. There is no white equality in white supremacy. White supremacy is a propaganda tool of the white elite. And the sooner white people recognize, acknowledge, and reject that, the better they will be and the better this country will be. Because one of the tools of white supremacy, and I've said it before, is to punish black people, brown people, people of other ethnic groups, people of other groups like LGBTQAI groups, punish them harshly. Take away fundamental rights and allow whites to sit on the sidelines and accept it because those groups are being punished, but they are also losing rights themselves. That's the thrust of white supremacy. We will harm those people while we also take your rights away. And by the time you figure out we have taken so much from you, it'll be too late. And I think the Big Beautiful Bill, or the Big BS Bill, is one of the prime examples of that. It is the quintessential example of how white people are constantly exploited by white lawmakers, white corporations, and white institutions because they continue to make you believe that they are with you as we hurt those people while they continue to pillage and profit off of white people. And so I really think that needs to be looked at as we enter this, as we are in this next phase of basically what is an American coup. There has to be a wholesale rejection of this attempt to mainstream white supremacy, because all that it will do is continue to consolidate power at the highest level, flattening the judicial branch, which they're doing it pretty much to themselves, as well as the legislative branch, both of them killing themselves in an effort at flattening out power and giving it all to the executive branch. The mobilization of the National Guard in Democratic cities will not end there if folks are not willing to fight. Because once it becomes untenable at the losses that individuals are taking in, like I said, those flyover countries and then the Deep South, they will begin to rebel too. And that's why they are quintupling down on white supremacy, racist language, and trying to implement white supremacy, racist policies, because they want to give white people something. And what they're willing to do is to give you racism, not health care, not protection against natural disasters, not safe food, not the ability to sell your goods and services overseas. No, none of those things. They just want to give you racism. And so that has to be rejected if this country is to survive, literally, without being plundered. Remember, the definition, the mission of white supremacist groups is simply this. Their purpose: manipulate the financial and political exploitation white people experience from white lawmakers, corporations, and the wealthy elite by redirecting white anger and betrayal away from the white exploiters and turning it into rage against minority groups. White people in America, do not settle for racism. This is the time when you need to get up in your lawmakers' faces and say, I be damned if I'm going to let you do this to us, and require them to answer to the people who have actually elected them into office, and to say what we're not going to do is let you turn this country into a tinderbox where we kill one another while y'all sit in your bunkers and collect your checks. Can't let it happen. Cannot let it happen. And they feel the pressure, which is why the level of racism is through the roof, why the level of manipulation of media is through the roof. So do not give in. Continue to fight, consolidate, unify, meet with people that you normally would not meet with. Talk to people who are in same socioeconomic status as you, people who are not in the same socioeconomic status as you, people who are not even in the same geographic area as you, across racial, ethnic, and religious lines, because everyone is feeling the same thing. Do not be fooled into thinking you are excluded from the hell that is here and that is coming because you have a shared whiteness with those in the administration and those who are in power. White equality is a myth to white supremacy. I'm Reverend Dr. Elliot Robinson with the R3 Podcast, where we look at race, religion, and rhetoric through the lens of misinformation and disinformation. Until next time, take care. God bless.